that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Finnell. Tom Finnell, man about town.
Hello there.
And I'm George Harvey. And
I woke up this morning listening to myself on the radio.
Yeah. That's kind of... Now, what station is it?
WKVT.
WKVT. Just so everybody knows what you're talking about. All right. We do things that come out weekly on WKVT early in the morning. No easy time for a lot of people to get up, but you know it's there. Every day I get up and I spend a few hours looking at the news pertaining to climate change, global warming, energy, nuclear energy, resilience. Sometimes a lot of different things. I do web searches, and every day I find 10 to 15 articles. And links to those articles are put up at my blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com, which started on the 2nd of June, 2012.
Okay.
Prior to that, I had been doing the same thing, but I'd been sending out the information by email. But my point of my mentioning that is that today is the 1000th day since it started, and I did my 1000th regular daily blog post.
Okay.
Originally, I was doing like 3-4 articles a day, and after 2 months, I switched to doing 8 to 12, and now I'm doing 10 to 15, and I've got almost 11,000 articles linked in that time. I think I've looked at over 250,000 articles.
I bet you have. I wouldn't bet against that.
Anyway, I see a lot of stuff, and what we're telling you is about what we've seen in the last week. So we will start with Friday, February 20th. And do we start with Friday? Or do we start with
Thursday?
We start with Thursday. I had my screen scrolled to the wrong location. Thursday, February 19th. An NRG energy subsidiary, NRG Renew, will join Kaiser Permanente, a major U.S. health provider serving over 9 million people, in creating one of the top 3 on-site commercial solar portfolios of all U.S. companies. The California project will also be one of the world's largest vehicle parking solar projects.
Well, there's a picture there, and it looks like it's a composite. Some of the vehicles are real pictures, but the people aren't, so it's an artist concept.
Yeah.
But what they're showing there is the parking lots have canopies, which are solar panels.
Solar panels.
Which make a lot of sense.
Right.
Because they're protecting the cars.
Right.
And in the Southwest, the cars need protection from the sun.
Yes.
You know, they really do.
Yeah.
So they're providing double duty because it's wasted space. There's a number here, there's some numbers that were in this article. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory is the source, and they tell us that pavement accounts for 35 to 50% of the surface area of a typical city.
Yes.
And exposed parking lots comprise fully 40% of that space.
Right.
So they're utilizing the space, doing double duty.
Right.
And they're getting the bennies of
right. And you know, the amount of asphalt in the United States is absolutely astonishing. I remember when I was in high school, early high school, this is I think 9th grade or something, hearing that the amount of asphalt land in the United States covered with asphalt was approximately equal to the area of the state of Louisiana. And
okay, I can believe that. I would have said as much as New England.
Well, I don't know if that included rooftops, but
probably
that's
probably
a
just
huge
roads,
amount of space which is heating up in the sun.
Yeah.
And I've wondered how much that contributes to climate change. Probably a lot.
Well, it soaks up the heat and then it releases it at night, so it's definitely heating the air.
Right, and you have what's called the urban island effect, where where cities heat up.
Oh yeah, New York City, downtown Manhattan, is quite a bit warmer than 20 miles out of town in Westchester County.
Yep, No doubt about it. Anyway, our next one is exciting. It comes from Clean Technica. The last one did come from Clean Technica.
That's a good source.
Well, it's a really good source. I have two sources that I go to on a daily basis before I do the searches. Aside from regular news, there's two regular news sources that I go to, one of which is CNN, the other is Huffington Post. But two sources for just renewables, and one of them is Clean Technica, and the other one is the Energy Collective.
Okay.
And they have good information. Anyway, it comes from Clean Technica, and it really got me kind of riled. Last week, that being the week before the 19th of February, Rolling Stone magazine published a blockbuster climate change article complete with an incendiary title, quote, "The Pentagon and Climate Change, How Deniers Put National Security at Risk," end quote. Now the U.S. Navy has posted a response with a forceful declaration in support of the Rolling Stone article. And that article was about politics.
Oh yeah, it's all about, well, it's not all about it, but mainly about politics.
Mainly about politics. It was about how politics is causing people to take stands on science.
Yep.
And those stands on science, which are in denial of what's going on, are making it more and more difficult for the military to do its job. And they are starting to complain. They actually started complaining a couple of years ago, so I wasn't surprised by this. I was surprised, however, that the U.S. Navy would come out with a response that was a forceful declaration on an article which was really talking about the leadership of the Republican Party doing things that were undermining American security.
Well, that's the subtitle of the article.
Read the subtitle.
I've got it. The leaders of our armed forces know what's coming next, but deniers in Congress are ignoring warnings.
Yeah.
And then it caps it off with a rather dramatic illustration. And that's the illustration up there. I'll pull it up. It looks like a bunch of aircraft carrier superstructures welded onto a bunch of rafts.
I was saying it looks like a bunch of trawlers with World War II 3-gun mounts on them.
Well, they're superstructures from carriers.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
that might be what they are.
They use
But
the same one over and over again.
The 3-gun mounts that they use
Yeah.
are not current. I don't know of any ship that's current that has 3-gun mounts on it.
There might be a cruiser or two.
There might
There's no
be.
more battleships. We're
Yeah,
not
the
don't have
battleships
them.
have been
Aircraft
decommissioned.
carriers don't have them. Destroyers
don't
have
think-
2-gun mounts.
2-gun
You're right.
mounts,
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let me before we leave this.
Yes.
I'll mention, by the way, as I said, I woke up this morning. We were on radio.
Yes.
This is what we were talking about.
This is what we were talking about.
Well, this is what this came from the article. Climate change is not only a threat to the environment, but a threat to our national security. Coastal military bases and U.S. Navy missions on seas are at risk. And they're talking about rising oceans here.
Yeah.
Okay, military readiness could be compromised by these environmental changes. It is also a way of boxing in all the deniers in Congress who have blocked climate action, many of whom, it turns out, are big supporters of the military.
Yes.
And
this
is
has
interesting.
been a problem. In the past, there was a point where leaders of the Republican Party tried to get into some sort of appropriations bill, a thing saying that the military could not buy
Solar power or something like that, wasn't it?
well, they were not
Renewables.
allowed to buy power that cost more than conventional power.
Okay.
And this was
It sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds good until the military comes back and says, "Don't you realize that our men are going to die if you try to enforce that?"
Well, one of the things the article pointed out, and I don't have it here in my notes, was that in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
we lost a lot of soldiers and a lot of truck drivers who were transporting oil to our remote bases.
We've got an article about that coming up.
Coming up.
In this list today.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Right. Okay, we will go on. Our next article from vtdigger.org. Green Mountain Power announced that for the third year, thanks to power generation at the Kingdom Community Wind Farm, 5 Northeast Kingdom towns will receive Good Neighbor Fund payments. This year, GMP will distribute more than $188,000, an increase of $62,000 over the previous year.
That's significant payments.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
That's very nice.
Those towns that they're paying these things to do not have huge populations. This is not
No, they're
Burlington or
all
Rutland.
small towns. Eden, Vermont. I don't
Yeah.
even know where that is. But
Well, you know,
Kingdom Community Wind.
right. There's every time I think about Northeast Kingdom and so forth and towns in Vermont, I think about Lewis, which has a population of 0. But, you know, I mean, again, Searsburg has a population of about 90 or 100 or something
like that, yeah,
And they've
yeah.
got 11 wind turbines
Yeah.
to sing them to sleep at night. Okay. Friday, February 20th. We have this from Clean Technica. No matter how fast the cost of oil drops, it's just, blah, blah, blah. Having trouble speaking. No matter how fast the cost of oil drops, it just can't keep up with the pace of renewables, in electric vehicle batteries. In the latest development, a team of researchers from the University of California, Riverside, has come up with a paper-like material that could bring in a new generation of high-range batteries.
Well, this goes along with something I've been saying right along.
Yeah?
There's a lot of smart people out there working
Boy, are
on
there.
these things, and some of
Absolutely.
them are going to hit right on the head.
Yep.
And this is interesting because it looks like paper, but it's made out of sand.
Interesting.
It's silicon dioxide. That's
Yes.
sand.
Basically, it is. It's no question about that.
And
But
it's replacing carbon, which, for reasons I didn't delve into, was limited in its capacity.
right,
And this stuff has a greater capacity.
right.
And there's pictures of it up there. It looks like steel wool. It's just very, very fine fibers that are 1/100th the size of a human hair.
Wow.
So they're small.
You don't want to breathe those fibers. They'd probably make you sick.
I think you're right.
Anyway, that's an interesting, and the battery technologies is changing all the time.
Well, like I said, there's more people working on
Yeah,
old ideas, new ideas,
right.
old ideas that they're recycling.
That's right.
And they're coming up
And
with different ways.
Here is
to
one of
utilize
them
it.
right here, our next article.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
In
yeah, this is a
Scientific
good one.
American, I love this. Pumped storage has been around a long time, much longer than renewables' intermittent nature required it. What required it before renewables? Well, in July 1930, the magazine Popular Science ran an article announcing the start of operations at the first U.S. 10-mile storage battery, or pumped hydro energy storage plant in Connecticut. And that plant is still there, still going.
It's still running.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what were they backing up? They were backing up big baseload power plants.
I think it was a coal burning plant.
Yeah.
Right
Well,
up the road.
The plant that it was backing up is gone, but this.
Well, there's a picture. That's not of this plant. That's of a much newer one in South Carolina.
Okay.
But for those who haven't been following us, we've talked about pump storage before.
Before, yeah.
And there was a lovely diagram about that, from the era.
Yes. Yes.
Of that plant.
Yes.
And I'll read the description because the description explains what's going on.
Okay.
Surplus electricity from a steam power plant at Devon, Connecticut, 45 miles away, charges this giant storage battery by pumping water from the Housatonic River beside the power station to the storage reservoir 230 feet above. When Connecticut needs more power, gates at the reservoir are open, the water rushes downhill through a water turbine that drives a 44,000 horsepower generator.
Right.
That's pretty big.
Yeah.
For the day, it was very big.
Yes.
Thus, at peak hours, electricity from the dynamo, that's what they called them in those days,
Yes.
is fed back to the power network that supplies the state. Not only at certain times of day, but from week to week, this power storage produces startling economies. So efficient is this great storage battery that it delivers 61 horsepower for every 100 horsepower that is used to pump water. Well, it doesn't sound that great.
It doesn't sound that great, but when you
But
compare
you're
it
buying the power practically for nothing when nobody wants it.
Right.
And you're selling it when everybody wants it.
That's right.
So there's a profit there.
Yes, and
that's
the
what
fact
they're all
is,
about.
if you look at the wholesale rates during the daytime and the wholesale rates during the night, there are times at night where the wholesale rate is going negative in the Midwest.
They're
And
basically paying you to take the power.
that's right. And so they would pay you to pump the water up to the top of the mountain. And there, of course, even if the price is low, say 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour, you pump it up at 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and then you charge 25 cents per kilowatt hour as it comes down. If you can multiply your investment by 10 every day,
You're doing pretty good.
you're doing pretty good. So,
I remember reading an interesting wrinkle on this concept.
yeah,
They weren't pumping water uphill. They were driving a train full of locomotives filled with ballast, not locomotives, but cars, up a hill.
Up a hill.
And
then
driving it back down
Yep.
and using the locomotive to generate power.
Yes. There you go. Okay, next item, same day, this is Friday. Citigroup, Inc. said it would set aside $100 billion. That's a lot of money. Well, at least
That's
it is.
more than I have, yeah.
Yeah. To fund environmental projects over the next decade, doubling the amount it had earmarked for such projects in 2007. Citigroup said it would fund projects related to renewable energy, greenhouse gas reductions, and sustainable transportation. This from ecobusiness.com.
It's interesting because the last line on this article is the project constructed by SunPower Corp is expected to generate 579 megawatts of power, which is a decent amount, but not earth-shattering. It's not a record.
Is that the same article?
Same article.
Okay.
When completed by the end of the year, making it the largest solar project in the world. They're talking about one of the projects that Citi.
Oh, one of the projects that Citibank was
Now,
doing. Okay.
We've already
forgotten
talked about
about that.
Chinese putting in solar projects that are
Huge.
900 megawatts
Yeah.
and more.
And the Indians are putting in stuff
And the
that's
Indians
just
are doing it too.
unbelievable. You know,
I really meant the Indians because that's
Okay.
what we've been talking about.
yeah, the stuff is just unbelievable that they're
So
doing.
when this plant is completed, it'll be the biggest plant in the world, but only for a couple of weeks.
Well, one thing about, renewable power is the United States has fallen behind China, and the United States is very soon going to fall behind India. And when they've got their acts together and they're paying nothing for fuel, the United States is going to be paying for fuel. Why are we doing that? Maybe that's what the Navy was complaining about.
Well, what the Navy was complaining about is a big part of it.
Yeah, I think
and
it
it's
is.
politics, and
Yep.
it's money, and it's whatever.
Yep. Now our next item from Saturday, February 21st, from Green Tech Media. It's an opinion piece entitled, "We Don't Need New Energy Storage Innovations." And this is what it starts off saying. There's a lot of talk about energy storage being a holy grail.
And there's the Holy Grail up there.
By golly, for solving problems of deeper renewable saturation in the U.S. grid. But it's time to start pushing back again on this rhetoric. The solutions we have now for storage are sufficient to the task. And they are.
Well, that's the message here. They are sufficient.
Yeah.
But are they the best solution?
No, they're not.
That we don't know.
Yeah,
you know,
well,
but-
we know they're not.
But in any case, they're on the right track because what they're
Yep.
talking about is balancing demand against load.
That's right.
And the technology now exists to do that.
Yep.
And it's being installed more and more
More
places.
and more places. And
that coupled with storage and stuff like that, it puts the lie to the idea that renewable power isn't dependable.
yeah, it puts a lie to the idea that it's intermittent, and
Yeah.
that intermittence means something. The fact of the matter is, it is intermittent. But when you get right down to the nitty gritty of what intermittence means, you discover that
Everything's intermittent.
Everything is intermittent, and it doesn't matter. So that's that. Our next item. Are we done looking at the Holy? We are.
I
And
think
we're
we
looking at
are.
me
I mean,
now.
we could talk about that, but we
The Holy
got
Grail.
only an hour here,
Yeah.
so let's
You don't
move
want
on
to talk
the
about
next.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade? Okay, Huffington Post. It's been a frigid. It has been frigid in the U.S. this week. This is
Yeah,
last
all
week.
around the country.
All around, and in New England, it's been frigid for weeks on end. But nationally, the country has been going through a surprisingly warm winter. According to the National Climatic Data Center, the December 2014 to January 2015 period has been the 6th warmest on record in the contiguous United States.
Well, this article talks about some of the parts of the country that have had record warmth.
Yep.
So we're cold here in New England, but California's still baking.
Yes, and you know, this is interesting because years ago, I had read that the climate change models that they had been producing at places like NOAA and so forth, the Weather Channel has its own models. Those models had predicted that as the temperatures got warmer in general, the Northeast would get colder in the winter and much more precipitation.
Well, I've been reading about exactly that.
Yeah.
Trying to explain the cold weather
Well,
we've been having.
you know, we've got deniers in the world who are saying, but it's so cold out. And the fact of the matter is, Tom.
We still have winter. There can't be any global warming.
Yeah, right. This winter has been cold, but it has not been the coldest winter I've ever seen.
Well, I can't really remark on that one, but I do know a typical winter, we had about 3 weeks of polar weather in January.
Yeah.
And this year it's extending almost to the end of February.
Right.
And that's unusual to me.
But I remember, I think it was the winter of 1982 in Winchester, New Hampshire, where I lived. The first snowfall was in November, and
it stayed.
It stayed until April, and we had snow under the north side barn roof until I think probably the third week in May, and we had weeks when the temperature never got above zero.
Wow.
All day. Yeah.
All day and all night.
That's right.
There's a takeaway from this, and it's 2 sentences. I'll read it.
Okay.
In case your climate change denying relatives mention the cold right now as evidence that global warming is a hoax, remind them that weather is not climate.
Yes.
A few cold days don't change the overall temperature trends, which are going up.
Yes.
There is established scientific consensus that the climate is changing and humans are very much responsible.
Right.
Well,
What
I'm
can
not
you
sure
say?
it's been proven, but it certainly looks
The
looks
people
very
in
likely.
the climatologists and meteorologists seem to be comfortable with the idea that we know for a fact that it's happening. Our next item is
Back
the
to the
one that we
Navy.
talked about for the Navy before.
Back to the Navy.
Yep. The U.S. Navy Task Force Energy is now drawing attention to an op-ed by a former Navy commander outlining the risks of continued oil dependency. Like another recent one, it pulls no punches, drawing attention to the thousands of American deaths attributed to petroleum transportation in Iraq and Afghanistan. Most of the Americans who died in those two places were protecting truckloads of oil.
That's what I mentioned that, and that's basically what this article is concentrating on.
Yeah.
That and the rise of the seas.
And what they're saying, you know, in the armed forces is, okay, it isn't just Iraq and Afghanistan. This is the world, and this is the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have problems protecting petroleum until we stop having to protect petroleum.
A good way of looking at it. That's,
You know, and the
who's going to
alternative,
deny that?
yeah, the alternative that they got is that they use something that the Koch brothers would just as soon we not use, which is solar power going out into the field with batteries. And that's why, you know, these wonderful people who are American patriots and pro-American and pro-democracy and pro-free market are undermining American strength, undermining democracy, and honestly,
For the sake of politics.
I think it's for the sake of enslaving the free market.
Well, it's
You know, what is a free market? It's
there
a
is
market,
no such thing.
Well, yeah. What is the ideal free market? Is a market that has no government regulation. Now, what is government regulation? Well, among other things, it is protection.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
people who need protection. So if you remove the regulation, you've also removed the protection, which means that whoever controls the market can sweep in and enslave the whole thing.
Well, basically, that's kind of what's happening.
That's what's happening. And we've got in this country politicians who have been elected because somebody paid for their advertising.
Yep.
And they are beholden to the people who paid for their advertising.
Well,
and
they got to be reelected, you know. So
yes,
they
and
need some
you know,
more of
there's a
this.
very quaint term that describes the government of the United States as it exists today.
Corruption?
Kleptocracy.
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 Yeah. Well, and we're not alone.
No, we're not alone. Unfortunately.
Moving right along.
We're moving right along, yes. Okay, Sunday, February 22nd. That article that we just had was from Clean Technica, so was this one. Electric car sales, including plug-in hybrid electric cars in the UK, surged over 300% in 2014 as compared year on year against 2013, according to the most recent figures from the European Automobile Manufacturers Association. EV sales in the UK rose from just 3,833 units in 2013 to 15,361 units in 2014.
Interesting. That's almost exactly 400%.
Well, they said it rose 300%, so
No,
that's...
I did the math.
Yeah, it is.
It's 400.001 or something
Really,
like that.
is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
they talked about Germany, 70% up.
Yep,
France, 30% up.
yep.
Total European Union, 36%.
Wow.
And here's a biggie. Non-EU, Europe,
Yes.
140%.
Non-EU.
This is Norway, and this is,
I thought Norway was in the EU.
no, it's not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Norway is very big on electric vehicles. You remember who killed the electric car?
Yeah.
Okay, then you remember that there was a thing called the Think City, which was put out by Ford.
I don't remember that one, but
Okay,
okay.
well, it was one of the cars that was in there. And they all disappeared from the United States. And the reason why they disappeared was because they were all under, none of them had been sold. They were all under
under lease.
lease. They were recalled at the
Yep.
end of the lease period, and what happened to them?
I thought they crushed them.
No, they sent them to Norway.
Did they really?
Now,
I'll
the
be
GM car they crushed.
Okay,
And
okay.
it took me a long time to figure out why that happened.
They didn't want this.
They didn't meet U.S. Road safety standards.
What was that? Is that
So
what it was?
the government only allowed them out for a
For the
limited
test.
period of time to
I'll
test
be
them.
darned.
So
what,
that was a
what was the
wide-
deficiency?
The deficiency was basically they had been designed and had been brought to a point where they were just about to go into production before changes that were brought about in things like safety bags and things like that.
It was something like reinforcing bars and doors and stuff.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
That kind of stuff.
And it would have cost too much to deal with them, and General Motors and Ford just said, well, what are we going to do? And they made a deal that they needed to do the test. They wanted to do this test.
Yeah.
So General Motors did the big car, which I forget the name of. Ford did the Think City, which was a smaller car, and it was limited to 40 miles an hour, which is a city vehicle. A lot of people don't realize this, but there is a thing called a city vehicle, which is licensed differently and has different safety things built in. And Chrysler had a thing called the GEM. And the GEM was a neighborhood vehicle, which means that its top speed was limited to 25 miles an hour. And you see these GEMs used a lot in warehouses and things like that, where you don't want to have bad air coming from an internal combustion machine driving around. But you can license them and you can drive them in places where the speed limit is never above.
If you're living in the suburbs, this is adequate to drop the kids off
Absolutely.
at school,
Absolutely.
to pick up a loaf of bread and a bottle of
Absolutely.
milk at the supermarket.
Absolutely.
And you want to go 600 miles across the country,
Use a different car.
You rent a car.
That's right. That's right. And these cars are much cheaper. And of course, part of the problem with the older ones, like the GEM, which you can buy, they're still made, it's not Chrysler anymore. They spun that off or they sold it to somebody.
But it's still being made.
GEM is
Good.
still being made, as far as I know. You can buy them new. They're not terribly cheap, but you can buy them new, and you know they use very, very little power to
Oh yeah, I
to
would
go around.
expect.
Yeah. So anyway, now our next one comes from Fox News, believe it or not.
Oh, well, you're jumping the gun.
Am
You
I?
got one here
I
about
got
fracking.
one about cracking. Oh yes, Huffington Post. Sorry about that. The oil and gas industry sponsors and spins research to shape the scientific debate over horizontal hydraulic fracturing or fracking. That's the conclusion of analysis by nonpartisan group Public Accountability Initiative of more than 130 documents distributed to policymakers by industry representatives. Sorry, I garbled that. Basically, what it says is that group, which is just looking for accountability, they're nonpartisan, looked at 130 documents and discovered that they had been spun into the facts in them had been spun into pro-industry stuff that they really shouldn't have been.
I did read something in this article, and it mentioned an article that was written down, and it said, we discovered no deleterious chemicals, or something like that.
Yes.
And if you read into the article, they didn't look for them.
Yes. Okay.
Well, you know, both sides, I think, are putting their best foot forward here.
Well, that's
But
not a surprise.
some people are getting paid to
Yes.
do it.
Yeah, and we will have one of those.
I mean,
in the,
statistics don't lie, but figures don't lie, but
no,
liars figure.
Figures lie and liars figure. You know. Anyway, we will get back into this in just a moment. Our next item after this is from Fox News.
Yeah, we've talked about these guys before. This is interesting.
Yeah,
Strange bedfellows.
Right. A broad political coalition from liberal environments to Tea Party conservatives has banded together in Florida to press for something that ironically is in short supply in the Sunshine State. Say that 6 times. Short supply in the Sunshine State solar power.
The Sunshine State.
Well, short
13th.
supply. Yeah. Right.
Florida, according to this article, Florida is the best solar market in the eastern United States, and it's clearly underperforming. Well, that's
Yeah.
all political.
A group launched a campaign to place pro-solar initiative on the state's 2016 ballot, and by the way, they have already got 1 million signatures on that. They've got over 1 million on that ballot initiative.
Well, I think the people that are supporting this are looking around and saying, you know, I'd like to have solar power
Yes,
in my
they
house.
are.
You know?
Yeah.
I don't care if the Koch brothers make a lot of money.
Well, you know, this is something that the environmentalists have got their reasons. The Tea Party conservatives, there are very few things that are more democratic than solar power and distributed power, and you know, keeping things local, and even wind and biomass and you name it. You can do all of this stuff locally, and it makes sense to do it locally, and they're banding together to do something that makes sense to all of them. And that is...
That's a good way of describing it, because that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. And of course, basically, we're back to the Koch brothers and how I'm saying that they're not looking for democracy. They're looking for an oligarchy
absolutely.
that rules by kleptocracy.
Absolutely.
You know, it's...
With them as the chief kleptos.
Yes. You know. So I'm on a kind of a rant about them today, I suppose. But
Well, we talked about a climate change denier that got funded by these guys. Now we're going to see what he looks like.
yes. Wayhawk Willie Soon, a prominent climate change denier and researcher, quietly took more than $1.2 million in payouts from the energy industry, including the Koch brothers and other oil lobbyists, over a period of 14 years, according to newly released documents obtained by Greenpeace. Now,
That's a lot more than he would have made teaching school.
I think it is, yeah. And he had other work that he did. He published 11 peer-reviewed documents, and 8 of them were thrown into real question here. And predictably, the right wing, or I shouldn't even call it right wing. I don't know what the term is. They're not right wing. They're
Troglodyte?
Yeah, they're troglodytes. There's got to be some word for
greedy.
government by fossil fuel interests. But they had been paying him, and he had been producing articles saying that the fossil fuels were not contributing to climate change. And this is an interesting thing, because he's not a climatologist. He's not a meteorologist. He's an astrophysicist.
Astrophysicist, yeah.
And so in the way that peer-reviewed journals work, the people who would peer review him are also astrophysicists.
Yeah.
And
They got other things to worry about.
The climatologists who have studied climate change are not the people who are doing his peer review, but also 8 of the publications that he supplied articles to require that he disclose who's paying him.
And he wasn't doing that.
He didn't do it.
Yeah.
So now what's going to happen is people are going to look at his work, and they're going to find out whether his work actually stands up under light of scrutiny.
Yeah, they're going to look at it with a jaundiced eye, perhaps.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
now they know who he is and who's paying him.
Yeah.
So
That article came from E! News Forest Park. But
I
in
wouldn't be
fact,
surprised he doesn't get back to teaching college soon.
They are reviewing his. He's working at Harvard as a researcher, and they are reviewing his employment right now.
Okay.
And the reason is because of this.
Yeah. Well.
Now that, as I said, came from E! News Forest Park, but it was all over the internet. So should we go on here?
Yeah. Let's talk about the next guy.
IT Pro Portal. Apple plans an investment of 1.7 billion euros, and for some reason I've got the note here that that's 1.3 billion pounds, but no note about how many dollars it is.
No,
but
and
it's going to be something
I
over.
let that one go by because usually I do catch up on that because
Yeah.
what's 1.7 billion euro to most of us?
It's
about $2 billion.
It's over 2 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably 2.2 billion or something, but it's over $2 billion. It's the biggest investment the American company has ever made on European soil, the American company being Apple. The plan is to create 2 new data centers in County Galway, Ireland, and Denmark's central Jutland. I think that's how.
And there's a story behind this too. They're evading taxes.
Yeah, well, but the facilities will be run on 100% renewable power.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Especially since power over there, especially in Ireland, is more expensive than it is here.
How much is it in Ireland?
I don't remember, but it was more because we stayed one time at a place that was built in an old mill.
Mm-hmm.
And the owner was a mechanic, welder kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he put in a couple of turbos.
Ah.
And so he was generating his own power. At that time, that was it. He was generating his own power. He was trying to get permission to pump it back into the grid.
Yep.
And last I heard, he had received that permission.
That's nice. Okie doke. Our next is from echobusiness.com. Engineers in Norway and Sweden, 2 of the countries trying hardest to develop wave power technology, have announced breakthroughs in their methods, which the inventors believe will make wave power competitive. The latest Norwegian experiment has been installed on a redundant fishing vessel. It just rocks in the waves and makes
But take
power.
a look at that picture.
Yeah.
Now, that's a lighthouse.
Yes.
Look at the size of those waves.
Well, you know, I've seen this. The perfect storm. I lived in Kingston, Massachusetts when the perfect storm hit. Kingston is right next to Plymouth. The house that I lived on was on a peninsula that was surrounded by a tidal river, and so I was really close to the ocean. But I worked at a place where the place where I worked was right next to the bay. And when the perfect storm hit, I went down to the waterfront and I watched. And bear in mind, this is in Plymouth Bay. This is protected. That guy, that lighthouse was not protected. But the waves hitting the seawall next to the place where I worked would hit the wall, and then they would go up. And they would go up above the top, you know, the spray would go up above the top of a warehouse that was right next to that seawall. There was a road in between. And they'd be picked up by the wind going over the warehouse, carried over the top of the warehouse and come crashing down on the cars in the parking lot.
Oh, boy.
And they knocked a hole in the seawall, and I don't know how big that hole was. It might have been the size of my thumb. But it was big enough that the pounding waves just destroyed the road on the other side, and I was watching pieces of asphalt jump 3 feet up in the air every time a wave hit. It was a mess. It really was.
I bet it was. I bet it was. In any case, this is another thing that people are working on.
Yes.
They haven't solved the problem yet, but there's people trying ideas.
Yep.
We have shown one, looks like a great big snake that goes like this.
But this thing sits in a fishing vessel.
Yeah, and the fishing vessel rises and falls.
And they say that it works like a pneumatic pump on a bicycle.
Well, they use the word bicycle pump.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what a bicycle pump is.
Well, you know, it's the pump they use for pumping
That's what I figured,
tires, but a lot of them are the older ones. You don't see so many of them now, but they look like.
Yeah, long skinny thing.
They were long.
They used to fit in the bike next to the
yes, that's right.
vertical.
That's right. Yep.
support, the seat
Yep.
holder.
Now they've got things that telescope, so they're shorter.
Uh-huh.
But I don't know what kind of bicycle pump they're talking about. But you know, it's interesting that they would do that.
And they got electronics here that make sure that this is always working in time with the waves.
Cool.
Because the waves have a period.
They do indeed. That's why they're waves.
Bingo.
Okay, we're up to Tuesday, day before yesterday, February 24th. The Energy Collective told us new coal plants in China. This is an op-ed piece. It's titled "New Coal Plants in China: A Carbon Bubble Waiting to Burst." And what it says is China's coal consumption growth has slowed down and China's coal consumption growth has slowed down and consumption fell in 2014. At the same time, coal-fired power generating capacity is growing rapidly.
It almost doesn't make sense.
It does not make any sense. This represents an investment bubble that will burst as overcapacity becomes too large to ignore. And what happened was, how long does it take to build a coal generating plant? Years.
Several years.
Yeah. So they were looking at this thing before the premier of China declared war on coal, which he did, I think last year. And they had all these plants that they were investing money in.
So they were a building as all of this was happening.
And they just outpaced the construction. The people who they built them faster than they should have, certainly. And so what's happening is that coal is coming online at the very moment that they're putting up many gigawatts of wind and solar and hydro. And
this graph shows that, and it really surprises me because the bar on the left is the existing hydro.
yes,
They have a vast amount of hydro.
they have a vast amount of hydro. They do. And a lot of that was developed years and years and
Long
years
time
ago.
ago, yeah. And it was I remember some of the controversy about it. I mean, they were destroying areas the size of Rhode Island to build dams.
Right.
And now they're generating a huge amount of electricity from those
right.
dams. But they didn't care. You get out.
Yes, that's
You
right.
know, top
Well,
down.
that's because, you see, the people owned the land,
Yeah.
but the people also owned the dam. So they were just telling the people what to own.
Okay. That's why they call it a People's Republic.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
And now we've got the People's Republic of the United States, in which we don't have ownership distributed, but we have risk and liability distributed.
Well, yeah, we mentioned that on the radio. It's
Yes,
called
we did.
Privatizing the profits and socializing the risks.
That's right. And we've got people who make a lot of money, depending on the fact that most of us can't sue, because
It costs too much.
it costs too much. Just because we get asthma or lung cancer and die, you know, that's our problem. Why should they worry?
Well, here in Australia, somebody's doing something about it.
Yes, indeed. This comes from an organization called the Fifth Estate. The government of the Australian state of Victoria has made good on a pre-election promise to support the state's first solar-powered town. Energy audits and retrofits to reduce consumption have already begun in Newstead as the first step toward a community microgrid using 100% renewable power.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does, but I should point out that there was an election in Victoria, an election in South Australia. I think Victoria. I know there was one in South Australia, but the ruling party for the country as a whole doesn't control Victoria.
No.
And what's happening, as a matter of fact, is, you know, people look at popular support for President Obama or George W. Bush or whoever, and it drops, you know, after they're elected. This guy, who's the president of Australia, or the prime minister, I should say, of Australia, has got a popularity level of about 20%.
It's going down.
It's really, really bad.
He's clearly allied with the coal industry, which in Australia is vast.
Well, you know, one of the things that he did was he said, it's bad for the free market to be giving subsidies to renewable power. So let's stop doing that and give it to the coal industry instead.
Because it creates jobs.
Because it creates jobs, yeah. I mean, it really it's well. I would say it's beyond the pale because of the way that is used, but what that really means is that it's in the hinterlands of Ireland. It's not. It's
By
much worse.
reducing reliance on coal-fired power and cutting their carbon footprint, Newstead residents will help inspire others in regional Victoria and beyond.
Yes,
to
and
move to
beyond.
renewables.
Yes.
Well,
Today, Newstead,
it's a good
tomorrow,
example.
the earth. Okay, and I'm sorry, everybody, that I'm being so political. Except for, I won't apologize to those people who want me to be political in exactly the way that I am. Okay, Renewable Energy Magazine tells us Senvion is delivering 18 wind turbines to the Northern Gründe offshore wind farm in the German North Sea. Each turbine has a rated power of 6.15 megawatts.
They're big turbines.
These are
They're
big, enabling it to supply about 4,000 households with energy. The Nordergründe offshore wind farm will be completed in the fall of 2016. Those are not the biggest wind turbines out there. I've seen test ones up to 8 megawatts.
Yeah, GE's playing with 8, and they're shooting at 10.
And they're shooting at 10. And if you consider 6.15 megawatts, and of course 6.15 megawatts would not do 4,000 households in the United States.
Okay.
The number would be more like 3,000.
Yeah.
Or even smaller.
Yep.
But this is and 18 of these things going up. We're talking about a lot of power.
They gave a little bit of a description that can let us estimate how big these things are.
Yeah.
They're producing these things in Germany, in Bremerhaven.
Yes.
Okay. And they're bringing the components out to the destination by sea, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The nacelle, the box up there,
Yeah.
of one of these turbines alone is as big as 2 single-family houses.
Yes.
These are large.
These are big.
Will be assembled offshore at a hub height of about 300 feet.
Yep.
So they're up there.
Yep. 30 stories up.
Each rotor blade is nearly 200 feet long and weighs about 25 tons.
Yes.
And a rotor star, I have never heard that expression before, but it makes sense. The rotor star has a diameter of nearly 400 feet. Well, if they're 200 feet long, yeah.
Yeah.
With the rotor sweeping an area larger than 2 football fields.
Yes.
These things are big.
They're big.
These things are big.
They are big. And you will probably not see anything that big installed in Vermont.
I don't think so. You might someday see it out off the coast of Massachusetts.
Oh, I think that they will be off the coast of Massachusetts. Cape Wind is not dead, by the way.
Oh no, it's still cooking.
going.
It's still cooking.
Okay. Yesterday, Wednesday, February 25th, and of course yesterday I say because we're recording this on Thursday, but
I'm glad you explained that.
yes. Our show is put on, 7 or 8 times a lot of the time.
It's various times of the day. You get up in the
Yeah.
middle of the night and you can see it
I can
sometimes.
watch myself, except that. Well, anyway.
That's
on
not
CNN,
Obama up there, by the way.
That's not Obama. Okay, I'm glad you told me. I wouldn't have known. On CNN, we got this story. President Obama, exercising his veto power for the first time in 5 years, rejected on Tuesday a measure greenlighting the construction of the controversial Keystone XL pipeline. It is unlikely GOP lawmakers will be able to reverse Obama's veto, as that would require 2/3 vote in each chamber.
Well, get this straight. He hasn't banned the pipeline. He just banned this particular legislation that was saying this is fast track.
Right.
Which means it's going to go right through Congress. Nobody's going to debate it. They're just going to vote. It's going to go, which the proponents of the pipeline wanted because they don't want to hear anybody arguing about it.
Of course.
So he said you can't do that.
Yes.
It's going through its normal procedure.
Yes.
And the Republicans are sitting there and they're looking at it optimistically and they're saying, well, next week we're going to vote to override it. This article says they're not going to do it.
Well, it's hard to imagine that they're actually going to achieve doing it in both houses because they need
the numbers don't.
They need a 2/3 vote, and they didn't have that the first time around. And that getting back to that Navy article about climate change deniers, the climate change deniers in the Republican Party seem to be in Washington D.C. There's some of them elsewhere, in Ohio and places like that. But in the majority of states, the Republican Party is not denying climate change. And these people in Washington, you know, they have a person who's called the party whip. That's the way Congress operates. And they go around trying to induce people to toe the line. And, you know, we've got people in Congress who are going to look at what's going on and just say, I can't sell out my country. I can't sell out the Navy. I can't sell out the armed forces.
I think they're starting to think about things like that, which haven't been being thought about.
And this particular vote...
Who thinks about the Navy and energy? I mean, you know, who thinks about it? But how do these Navy ships get around?
Well, and the other thing, too,
I was in the Navy. They gave us paddles.
Right. But, you know, this thing about trucks in Afghanistan being attacked, and that's how we're losing soldiers. Our soldiers are dying, or have died, not in great numbers today, but they're dying because they were protecting truckloads of oil. And our sailors are out in ships. The ships, by and large, are powered by, the big ones anyway, are powered by nuclear today. But why are they out there? Why are they operating in the Gulf? Why should we care about the Gulf?
Three letters, OIL.
Yeah, well, this is like the 5 reasons that I gave, if you remember, for why they do things. Money, 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 money.
Well, we got the finest, it was Mark Twain that said this, we have the finest Congress money can buy.
Yes, that's right, I agree. Except we don't have the finest anymore.
And that was 100 and some years ago.
Yeah, in those days it was the finest money could buy. Today, I'm really upset. That's why I'm ranting today, I suppose. Okay, the next one comes from Think Progress.
This is a good one.
As part of the first major retrofit in 30 years, 2 custom-designed wind turbines, and by the way, some solar panels as well, have started generating power for the Eiffel Tower. Where are they mounted? In the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, there's a picture of them right there.
Yeah, right there.
Vertical axis turbine.
Right, located above the World Heritage Site's 2nd level, about 400 feet off the ground. The sculptural wind turbines are now providing 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity annually.
And they don't make any noise.
And they don't. They're really kind of astonishing to look at. It's all that bent metal in the middle of the picture.
Yep, exactly.
And it goes around.
And they're capable of harnessing wind from any direction. They don't have to face the wind.
They don't have to face the wind. That's one of the things about vertical wind turbines, is that turbulent wind will drive them, and a turbulent wind will not drive the typical whirligig type wind turbine.
It won't drive it very well anyhow.
Yeah, if the wind is shifting, the turbine has to move.
And it can't move fast enough.
And it can't move.
Hey, it's the size of 2 houses.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the offshore wind, you know, the wind just keeps going constantly in one direction.
Yeah, the trade winds.
Yeah. Okay. That, I think, is an interesting one that we would have.
I love this picture.
Yeah, it's really quite something to look at.
Yeah.
And to think that the Eiffel Tower would be used as a place to put wind turbines is really kind of fun. Okay, our last item for this week, comes from Bloomberg. Sun Edison Incorporated, a U.S. solar panel maker and project developer, expects its annual installations to be more than double this year. The company intends to complete solar and wind facilities with 2,100 to 2,300 megawatts of capacity during 2015. Last year it did 1,048 megawatts of solar farms.
There's an interesting sub-story here. This is Sun Edison, which is not a generating company. They build solar. But it always piqued my curiosity why so many power companies in all different parts of America were named Edison.
Yes.
Consolidated Edison, Boston Edison, Southern California Edison. And I took the logical assumption, I thought it was logical, that at one point in time they were all owned by Edison.
Yes.
And it's not the story.
Okay.
And it is an interesting story. Edison announced he would give his patents free to any company, any generating company.
That was named after him.
That would name after him.
Oh my gosh.
So he sort of beat Elon Musk to the punch, but with a little bit of a twist of his own.
That's funny. Edison was a very strange sort of guy.
He was, yeah, he was.
Did you ever see his thing about concrete?
I don't think so.
Edison got the idea that concrete was the end all and be all of civilization.
Uh-huh.
And he started building houses that were built 100% of concrete.
Okay.
And I mean, the stairs were cast in place.
Well, I can see it happening, but it doesn't seem to me to be the best way to do it.
Well, it doesn't give you very good insulation.
No, but it's a great heat sink.
Oh dear. Anyway,
So now we're using straw bales.
Now we're using straw bales, and as a matter of fact, it's interesting you should mention that, because the founder of Sun Edison was a guy named Jigar Shah, S-H-A-H, who has lived almost his entire life in the United States. He was born in India, but he was at a meeting here in Vermont about a week ago,
Uh-huh.
and Nancy Ray Mallory, who's the publisher of Green Energy Times, which I write for, went to that. I didn't, and met Jigar Shah. He was the founder of Sun Edison, and he's the CEO of the Carbon War Room, which is Braniff's.
The Carbon War Room,
Yeah,
huh?
where they're really serious about this, doing something about carbon emissions, and they're putting millions of dollars into a lot of it is going into Caribbean islands, but she said to him, that she published a paper and she'd like to show it to him, and he looked at it and said, "I know all about this." Which made her feel really good about Green Energy Times, but there you are. He said, one of the things that he said, I can't agree with him on everything. I mean, he's a bright guy, but I don't agree about this. He said, how many people in this room think that we should, that we will retrofit all of the buildings in Vermont to be energy efficient? And very few hands went up. Mm-hmm. Then he said, how many people here think that we should retrofit all the buildings in Vermont? Mm-hmm. And all the hands went up. And he said, I'm going to disagree with all of you. We should bulldoze them and replace them with straw bale buildings.
No kidding.
That's what he said.
Well, he's got a point.
Well, he does have a point, but
they're efficient as hell.
They are efficient. But I think we can make the buildings that we've got efficient, and I think that maybe that's a good place to put
and at what cost?
ingenuity.
But the cost to do so has come down drastically.
It has. And
I mean, you couldn't buy fiberglass insulation 1.5 feet thick 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now you can.
Well, and there are a lot of things that you can do with houses. The fact of the matter is, if you have a tent with no insulation, just canvas, you can make it carbon neutral. If you have solar panels and you put energy into that's gathered from the sun, it's just a matter of scale. So we can make buildings in Vermont carbon neutral, and we don't have to go into outrageous areas to get them insulated, but we do have to insulate them.
Oh yeah.
And it's
insulation. Again, it's just one of those things that makes a lot of sense.
It does indeed.
Spec builders didn't want to do it because it cost them more money.
Yes.
People who were building their own homes were big on it because they realized that over the years they're going to save all of that money back.
Right. That's right. Well, we're drawing up to the end of our hour, so I think maybe we should say goodbye.
Well, according to this, we got a minute and 20 seconds. I mean, what can we? We want to twiddle our thumbs for a minute and 20, or just say goodbye to everybody?
I think we should give a magnificent goodbye to everybody who watches this show. They certainly have more patience than they should, but we hope you all have a great week.
Well, I've got to say, it is fun. It is fun.
Okay, bye-bye.
We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die. We dig and drill and waste what we find, break up the earth, leaving little behind, but we will grow lilies in the by and by. I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world, and may makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still.